All right. Hello, everyone. Very excited for this interview today. I have an amazing man, Rich Frieder, here today.
Hi, good to see you.
We are actually in the office together rather than doing this remotely, so exciting to be with you guys today. And if you're watching this as a recording, welcome as well. So, Rich Frieder is the owner of 3 different Learning RXs in Savage, in Egan, and in Woodbury. And one of the reasons I'm excited to have him as a guest today is we're going to talk about learning, attention, memory, and it's something that's close to his heart because of his own daughter who had struggled with ADHD, and that's one of the reasons that he got involved in this.
Yeah.
So welcome, Rich.
Thanks, Ty. Good to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you
Good to see
here.
you.
So maybe why don't you start, because I think people want to know always, like, why are you doing what you're doing? So maybe start with a little bit of your own journey in this process.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so as you kind of shared, my wife and I opened the centers mainly because of my youngest daughter, Katie. So Katie, at age 5.5, was diagnosed with ADHD, receptive and expressive language delays, and sensory integration dysfunction. So, ADHD is the most common diagnosis we work with. But for Katie, she was kind of, told to go down the very traditional path of she needs ADHD medication and she needs an IEP in the classroom. So we asked at the time, this was 11 years ago or so now, is there any other option for her? And it was pretty much no, not really. So obviously, wanting to help her, we moved forward with that. We weren't excited about medication, but given that was the only option we were really provided, we're like, well, we should try it. And this isn't true of every child, but for my daughter Katie, we tried 3 different types of medication. They all made her crabby, moody, dropped her appetite, and we're like, this is just my fun girl, just really struggled. And it also, we learned, when my daughter then was given an IEP in the classroom, an IEP is, individualized education plan. We thought it was addressing the issue, and as we learned more about the strategies in it, we saw that it was more working around the issue. So Katie could do her work in the hall where it was quiet, or have more time to complete things, or have things read to her because that was tough. And my wife and I realized at some point she needs to cope. I mean, right? You don't get an IEP in life, or even high school and college. So that's why we decided to open the center, and Katie's just doing so much better now. She's not taking medication, loves reading. And we're just so grateful. So it's really my own personal experience that drove us to open the center.
That's huge. I
so
think too, like, I love that you say that you come to this realization, like, well, there's not an IEP for life.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons that we brought him on today, is because just like in our office, we're trying to get to the cause of things and not just cover it up. Meds can be great to get through a tough time. I know some teachers like, oh, if they're on their med, they sit still in class. But again, like, that's not going to teach them a life coping skill.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
And I agree. I mean, what we find is issues like ADHD and others, there's a root cause to it. And often ADHD is even a symptom of other issues. Like you see that as well, Ty.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So what, aside from ADHD, are there other common challenges kids have that you tend to work with?
Yeah, I would say half of those we work with have a diagnosis like ADHD, dyslexia, students on the autism spectrum, or developmental delays, those types of struggles. And then the other half don't have a diagnosis, they just struggle. The most common issues we see are like those 2nd to 4th graders who struggle with attention, and work with a lot of families that, the child maybe could be diagnosed as ADHD, but you just don't want to go down that path. A lot of 2nd to 4th grade is where reading issues really start to pop up as well. So we average a 3.5-year gain in reading achievement for the average 11-year-old, which is a huge jump because we're addressing the root cause of it. And then the other group that we work with would be, from a school age perspective, a lot of middle school, junior high, high schoolers who are overwhelmed by school, having organizational issues, like just not on top of their work, which causes stress in the home, where parents are on them all the time or feel like they need to be on them all the time. So there's motivation issues that pop up, and it's because if there's weaknesses in cognitive skills, which we'll talk about in a bit, it causes motivation issues, because it means school is much harder than it seems it should be, and human nature is to avoid it. Absolutely. So, but we work with, our youngest student so far is 4.5. Our oldest so far is actually 95.
Okay. How about just real briefly, I know the focus probably more around kids, but some of the adults, what would a scenario be for an adult?
Yeah, so most common scenarios would be traumatic brain injuries. So, and that can be, it's a big category. That can be concussions, car accidents, chemo brain. We worked with a lawyer in Burnsville who had chemo brain, and we really helped her overcome that. Strokes. We're also working with individuals, seniors who have mild cognitive impairment, early stage Alzheimer's. One of the more fun clients we worked with is a guy named Ben Utak. Ben lives right in Lakeville here. He won a Super Bowl with the Colts back in 2007, and Ben retired because of his multiple concussion issues. And we brought his memory from the 12th up to the 98th percentile. It was life-changing for him.
That's
really
huge.
cool.
Yeah.
The other area that we see with adults is there's definitely a link between cognitive weaknesses and mental health. So, for example, if someone has lower processing speed or slower processing speed, it can result in feelings of being overwhelmed, which often then manifests as anxiety. So, there's not just the benefits of improved cognitive skills, it's the transfer effect that it improves mood, reduces anxiety, improves overall performance and outlook as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's huge when the brain is processing your world, right? It's taking all that information in. So in the classroom, it's taking in the reading, the writing, all the learning skills, but as soon as you leave the classroom, your brain's still taking information. It still has to process efficiently, otherwise you are going to get overwhelmed.
Yeah, we use our brain for a lot more than just school.
Exactly. It's
all the time.
Yeah, and that's, I think we'll maybe talk about next of how the program actually works and how it differs from other learning centers, other tutoring options out there. And I think one of the reasons it can be from 4.5 to someone in their 90s is because it's based on the foundations of how the brain works. Exactly. And you can help a child or an adult if you're using these fundamentals, help their brain work more efficiently.
Yep, absolutely. You're right.
Yeah. So similar with our adjusting in the office is whether it's a kid or adult, we're helping their neurology work better. So why don't you share a little bit how the program works and how it differs from other options out there?
Yeah, so especially this time of year when we're approaching summer, a lot of families are looking for ways to help their child improve so that next year is a little easier, not as difficult as last year. The most common approach, Ty, is obviously tutoring, summer school, those types of strategies. And those can help, but what's happening when you're doing tutoring is you're reteaching information that wasn't learned the first time. So basically what's happening is you're treating the symptom.
Yep.
LearningRx is actually not a tutoring center. We're what's called a cognitive skills training center. What that means is we're working to address the root cause, like you said, of the struggle. Versus, what happens too is you typically do tutoring every single year or just ongoing because you're never getting to the root issue. And each year school becomes more difficult and therefore you just have to do it again. And so if you can be Vanna White for me real quick, I can kind of... There you go. Okay,
I'm going to make sure the glare's not here, so I might be moving this around a little bit. But
okay.
I think that's...
So this is a learning model, and it really talks about how the brain functions, right? So this file cabinet over here, that we call the knowledge bank, that's really what school and tutoring focuses on, which is providing academic content. That's not what we focus on. We focus here on what are called cognitive skills. These are the skills that make up our IQ and enable us to learn effectively, or as we're adults, to just perform efficiently in our job and daily responsibilities. So an example of this, the knowledge bank would be if I asked you guys, as fast as you can, tell me who the first president of the United States is, and you would obviously say George Washington. A lot of families say Abe Lincoln, though. It's kind of so I don't know.
Maybe the first president that pops in there.
There you go. So anyway, but that's like that's like your knowledge bank is your database of information. It's like what's 3 times 3? 9, right? Well, that's the goal of schools to fill that up, which is obviously critical. We focus on your ability to process. So that would be more if I asked you as fast as you can, spell Washington backwards, go. What you could, but if you're like most of us, me included, you can't just whip that out. You've got to really think through and process that. Your ability to do that quickly and correctly totally depends on where these skills are. So we focus on cognitive skills because we're addressing the root cause of the struggle. And I'll just walk through these really briefly, what they are. The first skill is attention, which obviously we've hit on already, which is the ability to stay focused, tune out distractions, divided attention. Processing speeds our ability to think and think quickly, process information quickly. If that's not strong, it makes everything harder than it seems it should be. It really relates to attention issues because think of yourself as an adult, if you're listening to a lecture or a sermon and you can't keep up, you can't process fast enough, what do? You zone out. Right. So that looks like an attention issue, but the root cause is actually processing. And we see that all the time with kids and adults.
I see that when sometimes too in a subject I am interested in, I want to be paying attention, but if my brain can't keep up,
you just zone out.
It's going to zone out.
Yeah. So working memory, that is our ability to hold information long enough to use it. The main way a parent would see this at home is if you ask your child, I want you to put your laundry away in your drawer, bring the trash out, and then pick those toys up. And if that's not consistently done, or you can only give one at a time, that's an example of short-term memory or working memory. That's important academically because it's your child's ability to hold information long enough to use it. So think about math, which is multiple steps. Usually you see careless mistakes. Talked to a family last night with their child has low working memory. He struggles to get his thoughts on paper and organize his thoughts for writing assignments, things like that. It's a really tough skill if it's not strong. And also for, like middle school and older, those are kids who are like forgetting to turn their papers in, forgetting to even have homework. It's a very frustrating skill when it's low. Yeah. Logic and reasoning is our ability to understand concepts, problem solve, overall comprehension. Obviously really important for math. As kids get older, it also has a lot to do with their independence, so how to manage their time, how to study, how to organize their life so that they get everything done and don't forget things. Long-term memory is just our ability to retain information. So that affects us because if that's not strong, every school year becomes more difficult because every school year the information builds on itself. And if you're not retaining it, you develop content gaps over the years, and every school year is harder. It also is one of the most important reading skills because memory is very involved in reading, like a first grader who struggles with sight words, and then a third grader who now has to read non-phonetic words like laugh. And that takes total, you can't sound that out. That's memory, right? Visual processing, that's our mind's eye, the ability to think in pictures, images. If it's strong, it relates to creativity. This is one of my youngest daughter's strongest skills. She's a ridiculous artist, really, really talented. Helps with math because you picture math. And then the last is auditory processing, which is our ability to segment and discern sounds correctly. We also call it phonemic awareness, and that's the other really critical reading skill. It's the phonetic side of reading. So thanks for holding this up.
Yes,
your arms are getting tired. But the point is, if any of these aren't as strong as they need to be, it just makes learning much more difficult for students, and that's why we focus there, because that almost always is the root cause. Absolutely. And like I said, the other way that shows up then is lack of confidence, that lack of motivation, because if these skills are weak, what it means for that child is to get through a typical school day, mentally they have to work really hard to do it. Then they get home and have the backpack full of homework. And how do you think that will go? And they're certainly not going to be excited to get it done. Right. So you typically see procrastination, put it off, or avoid it completely because it's hard.
And all the work that puts on you as a parent then, because now this is the end result you're looking for, and filling their head with knowledge is important. But if you can build this foundation, it's going to make the results so much easier.
Well, and I would argue too that when you think of our goal is to equip our kids to be independent adults. So yeah, we need to know George Washington's first president. We need to know 3 + 3 is 6, obviously. But the skills we're talking about, Ty, are the ability to stay on task, problem solve, hit deadlines, retain critical information, which, we as adults know that when you get in your career, that's what really matters. Right. So that's why we also work with adults. We're also what's called a vocational rehab provider, because recognition that the skills we train help vocationally.
Cool. Yeah. And that's what I like is the real world application. I know when I was in college, there was a friend of mine who could actually get really good grades, but couldn't always apply it to the real world in that real-time processing. Yeah. And that's such a crucial piece.
Kind of book smart, but can't transfer.
Exactly, yeah. So that deeper application of things.
Definitely.
What are some of with the kids, adults that you work with, what are some of the changes that they're seeing along the way that they know the program's working for them?
Yeah, so it does take some time. So that the gains do come in the last half of the program because we have to build a foundation. But the most common improvements are, my child can actually focus. My child, and one that we hear all the time that I love is, you know what, we used to have, in fact, we were just on Twin Cities Live yesterday for a student with this issue where reading was so hard, she couldn't focus on tests, so it was just tons of tears with homework. This year, she's now in 3rd grade. She comes home, she gets her homework done on her own. There's no tears, there's no stress, because she's been equipped to do it. So that's one of the biggest changes is, we see huge changes in confidence, an ability to persevere through hard tasks. And then, the typical improvements of I can stay focused, reading fluency. It's so exciting when the light bulb goes on for kids and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm reading fluently and this isn't so hard now. Right. Most kids want to read really well. Obviously issues with just being able to think through and problem solve. Improvements for older students. Work with a lot of kids who struggle with test taking. Some have test anxiety. So strengthening their memory and processing so they're not forgetting what they just studied or feel so stressed because they can't process fast enough that their mind kind of just shuts down and they feel anxious. And also, really the big one is they're on top of their work. And this whole stress of I'm on my child all the time to get work done is not there. Right. Which is huge, not just for the child, but the whole family benefits from that. But I would say what's really fun is, when students come in, we do an initial assessment. At the end of a program, we have a program review and kind of a graduation. And just to see the changes in demeanor for kids from when they started, a lot of kids come in, their shoulders are down, they're just not confident, they're struggling, to the end where they're often beaming, that's awesome. So excited, like I can do it attitude, and that's really awesome. Right. And then the other change too, which I didn't mention, is we actually raise IQ on average by 15 points, which is a really big jump in IQ.
Jump, right.
The key is how all that shows up, like I talked about, but we actually measure results through standardized assessment tools as well.
That's awesome. And I think it's such a good thing for the family dynamic, like you're saying. That's one thing we promote in our office is families getting healthy together. And what you're saying, I love so much of the child's self-esteem is growing, and then mom and dad don't have to be so exhausted and frustrated and tired by putting all their energy in to having their kid do their homework and like maybe not even doing that well, and then just repeat day after day after day after day. It's exhausting.
Yeah, and it just gets worse because every school year is harder. Now, one of the things too that what I hear from parents after their child's been in the program for a week or two that they're most surprised by is I almost always hear, my child actually likes it. And that's just because the training feels game-like to them, and it's all one-on-one. So they develop a relationship with that trainer who's very encouraging to them, and kind of that they're pulling for them, across the table. You can do this. And so it kind of can become kids' happy place, actually, when they're achieving.
And I think that's great for you to hear probably as a parent, because you're like, well, if my kid doesn't like studying already, how am I going to get him to go to a learning center? Right?
That's true, and that's why, like, if you do tutoring, you're just kind of doing more of the same for the most part, where this is very different. It's fast-paced, it's fun, and most kids like it.
Cool. Yeah. And one of the big things that I love, too, is the ability to retain.
Yes.
So if you could talk about that, because a lot of parents I know we see do something for their child, and then as soon as they stop, the results tend to go away. And you're wondering, like, well, if I put this effort in, what are the long-term benefits?
Yeah, good question. So one of the great things about our program is when you train cognitive skills, the gains are long-lasting. So we do that initial assessment time. We use a tool called the Woodcock-Johnson 4 Cognitive Abilities Battery. Neurologists, psychologists use it. So that gives us an initial kind of diagnostics around why the child's struggling. We do the assessment again at the end to show an apples-to-apples comparison of here's where your child was at the start, here's where they're at now. And then we do an assessment a year after students complete the program. We have a 98% retention rate, which is,
that's
so
huge.
The reason for that is what's happening in our training is we're actually changing the way the brain is functioning. In fact, we have tons of published research. One of the one that was published about a year ago is in the Journal of Neuroimaging, which I'm sure all of your audience reads very regularly. But it shows we change what's called the functional connectivity of the brain. Why that's important is it means that we're not just training like tricks on how to remember better or things like that. We're changing the efficiency of the brain, the structure of the brain, which means the brain can work faster, is more efficient, can retain information better, can problem solve. Once the brain has been changed after training, then as long as there's not a concussion, as long as the family, the individual treats their brain in a normal, healthy way, the gains stay with them. So what's exciting is we just celebrated a couple months ago our 10-year anniversary. We had a lot of families that we worked with years ago come back, and what's really fun is families we worked with 8-9 years ago, like one is now a pilot, one is a policeman, one's an architect, and so they came through the program one time and haven't needed to come back for more training because the gains stay with them. So what's exciting is we can really change the trajectory of a child's future, because when you strengthen these skills, it just changes their whole outlook, and helps them get into college, helps them be successful in their career, which is what it's all about, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if for the people out there watching this, what is the next steps to find out if they qualify?
Yeah, good question. So the first step is what we call an initial assessment. So you would just give our centers a call, and we can schedule that. We can usually get those scheduled within a week or so. The assessment takes between an hour to an hour and a half. We give you an intake form to fill out because we want to hear, kind of why you're seeking us out, just any information there. We do the assessment, and then a day or two or after that, you would come back and meet with me, and I would just ask a lot of questions because I want to make sure I fully understand what's going on, and then walk through the assessment results, and then that's where I'm able to recommend, here's the right program, here are the options, and what you can expect as an outcome. So, we can get people in usually in a week or two to do that. And, the assessment itself is incredibly helpful because I've met with so many families where they're just trying to figure out what's going on. Like, why is my child struggling? Especially if, we're with a lot of students where their logic's, 80th percentile, they're really bright, but they're getting C's and D's, or they're even getting B's and C's when they should be getting A's.
Right.
And the parents are like, why is my really smart child struggling with reading? And this will tell you what's going on.
And is that with the assessment? Are you checking these different categories?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So what we had talked about before?
Yeah. So what it provides, Ty, is an age equivalency and a percentile in all of these key areas that I just talked about.
Perfect.
Compared to others your child's exact age.
Awesome.
So it's an excellent tool.
And that's, I think, such a great analysis to have because there might be strength in some but weakness in another, but they have to build all together.
Yeah, I would say most of the students we work with actually have an average or above average IQ, actually.
Interesting.
But IQ is extremely deceiving because IQ is kind of a weighted average of all those skills you just showed. So exactly what you said, if there's some really high, strengths in some areas, it's going to pull the IQ up, but it'll mask a couple of weaknesses. And you know what? Those weaknesses are what are causing the issue. And unless that's addressed, child just keeps struggling because those skills don't just automatically jump. They just stay where they're at your entire life, basically, unless you actually train them.
Right.
Just like if I want to run a marathon, but I don't really change anything about what I'm doing, sadly, I don't wake up the next day like, woo,
right.
amazing athlete ready to run a marathon.
Yeah.
It takes training to do it.
And that's the thing, the brain is so incredible at making compensations, right?
Yes.
So if the IQ's high, especially with a smart child, they'll start relying on others more.
Yeah.
But if that weak one's there, then it just never gets addressed.
Yeah, and what happens is the older you get, the child becomes, the harder it is to compensate with strengths for the weaknesses. But the concept behind what both of us do is the concept of neuroplasticity. That at any age, that's why we work with 4, and so far our oldest is 95. We'll go higher, but that's so far the oldest that sought us out. At any age, you can change these skills. And that gives hope to a lot of people. It certainly gave hope to us and has helped my daughter and so many others that we've worked with over the years quite a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what we'll do, we'll put your contact info in the comments below.
Okay.
Otherwise, the different centers, there's Learning RX. We've got Egan, Woodbury, Savage as offices that he has available. So we'll put that in the comments. Any other parting thoughts then?
No, just would love to meet you. If you want more information, you can certainly email me as well, or give us a call. And happy to share what we do in more detail.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Rich.
Thanks, Ty.
Appreciate
It's a
you being
pleasure
here.
to join you today.
Same here. Appreciate what you do for the community, and definitely
You too.
recommend you guys reach out. And we'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Bye bye.